Afternoon, everyone. I am Natalia Doné, Executive Board Member at the Brazil Climate Summit. As we begin our afternoon sessions, we turn to one of Brazil's most promising frontiers for decarbonizing hard-to-abate sectors, steel. According to the World Economic Forum, Brazil's clean energy mix, vast iron ore reserves, and capacity for green hydrogen production position the country as a potential global leader in decarbonizing iron and steelmaking. This session will then explore both the opportunities and challenges for this strategic task. So to talk about it, I'm going to introduce the panelists. Cornelius Pieper, Managing Director and Senior Partner at BCG. Grazielle Parenti, Executive Vice President of Sustainability at Vale. Jonathan Goldberg, CEO of Carbon Direct. And to guide the discussion, please welcome Luisa Palacios, Director of Research and Managing Director of Energy Transition Finance at the Center on Global Energy Policy at Columbia University. Please join me welcoming our panelists on the stage.
So the clock is ticking already, so let's get to it. Thank you so much, Luciana. Thank you, Thomas Trebat. Thank you, Georgie. I've been involved in this event since the beginning. It has grown. It is really a fantastic event, and I have to thank all the students at Columbia University that pull off this event every year. I see some of my students here, so it's a fantastic learning opportunity. And thank you for having me again to moderate this panel. And I love that I get to do steel specifically because it's one of those niche sectors that I hope that the panelists that we have here, which are fantastic, are going to make you fall in love with this topic. And the fact that the title is Brazil's Path to Green Steel Leadership says a lot about the competitiveness of Brazil, specifically in this sector. So I don't have to tell you, no, I mean, we're going to start with Cornelius, and he's going to talk about steel, more in the context of global demand and what this means for industry. And then we're going to go over some of the challenges and opportunities that Brazil, and in general, green industrialization faces. So why don't we start with you, Cornelius? Just walk us through what does it mean, really, green steel industry decarbonization, and why is it important?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here. Excited to be with this great panel on a topic that is close to my heart. So to begin with and set the scene a little bit, steel really matters. It's a commodity that is used basically for everything we do in our daily lives. Every year there's about 1.9 billion tons of steel that's being produced, which is an incredible amount. It stands for about 7 to 8% of global CO2 emissions. And it's been there for a very long time. And when you go back, the first blast furnaces, the technology that's being used today, were built in almost 1,000 years ago. So to change that and to decarbonize that is not going to be super straightforward. When we think about what's going on in the steel space and also with regard to, let's say, demand for green steel, today you can say demand is pretty small. Many companies, many stakeholders in the market are buying steel. Not very many are buying green steel or are willing to pay a price for that. However, I think that is changing, slowly changing, but that's an important signal. Why is that? There is first some regulatory developments. You heard about CBAM in Europe, which will start covering steel imports next year. So that's going to have an impact and also make it more interesting for non-European producers to think about green steel. There's also a shift on the private sector side. Many downstream companies are thinking about their Scope 3 emissions. They have made commitments. If you look at SBTi commitments, many of them have a deadline in 2030. That's the time horizon. Not everybody will meet them. Some will walk it back. Some will find other ways. But many companies will work towards being able to deliver against those. And if you're producing white goods, if you're an automotive OEM, you can't get around steel, because that is, a pretty sizable chunk of your Scope 3 footprint. So demand, starts to kind of materialize, and we'll see more of that. Already today, we can see, and point to specific deals and contracts where a premium is being paid, equivalent roughly to the implicit carbon price of the reduction. So something like 50, 60, 70 euros or dollars per ton of carbon reduced, translated to the steel. And that's meaningful. It's not everything, but it's meaningful. So that's the demand. On the supply side, the picture is a little bit different in the sense that we've seen lots of announcements in the last few years of, big production sites to be launched, in the US, in Europe, other places. But then, lately we've heard some cancellations in the US. SSAB has canceled their plant. Cleveland-Cliffs has canceled their plans after they lost the DOE grant. Also in Europe, things are being delayed. So it's not moving quite as fast. At the same time, there's other geographies and regions that are actually making moves, in Oman, in India, in China, like in so many topics. China started exporting green steel to Italy. So that's coming. But generally, I think there is a tendency or a development where I would rather expect that demand is going to grow faster than supply than the opposite. What will be interesting also to make, in a way, this market work better is what are the right mechanisms that are needed? How can you make sure that the steel that you produce and that you buy is actually green? It looks the same. A coil of steel is a coil of steel. You don't see the carbon footprint. So if I buy it and if I pay a premium, I want to have certainty that this is actually low carbon. So how do you make that, how to create that transparency? So we need market mechanisms and certifications and clear standards to make the match in a way between supply and demand. But to wrap it up, given these different developments, demand probably about to get significantly larger, supply somewhat struggling. I think that opens up an opportunity, specifically also for a place like Brazil that has, I think, fantastic endowments for making steel in general, but specifically also making green steel with high-grade iron ore, with renewable electricity, and what have you. And Grazielle, in theory, you're going to talk more about that. So I think that's maybe a few helpful comments to get us started. And I think it'll be an exciting development over the next few years.
Thank you, Cornelius. So this is what I heard. Steel is about 7 to 8% of total emissions. So that in and of itself already tells you that this is should be one of the priorities. The second thing I heard from you was that steel is it's key for the energy transition itself. We actually need steel to do the energy transition. And the third thing, which I think is fascinating, is that the green premium that everyone has been trying to seize, you think is coming or might be coming just because of the fact that we now have more demand than supply of green premium. So that's encouraging, right? But now we have somebody who's actually in the middle seat, in the driver's seat of green steel. So Grazielle, how are you looking at the market? What is Vale doing? So tell us a little bit about how you are looking at this challenge as an opportunity.
Well, thank you. Boa tarde for the many Brazilians that are here. And thank you so much, Luisa, and all the Climate Summit people for the invitation. And I really appreciate that Cornelius started to say, what is green steel? Maybe it's not so familiar for most of us here. So it's how and this is an important thing. So the taxonomy to define what's green steel is something. So starting from the end, so what is green steel? But in our understanding and an understanding of our customers, we see that similar as we saw in the morning in the panels about agriculture, that Brazil is a world leader, that Brazil drives technology, that Brazil drives this protagonism, the same we have in mining. And for this steel, the green steel and the decarbonization. So in Brazil, we are able to develop portfolio and strategy that can influence the whole value chain. So it's true that mining is in the beginning of the value chain of the steel. So when you say downstreaming on the value chain. And it's important that in the case of Vale, that we have a very special endowment where we have very high grade iron ore. And this is critical because the high grade, which means high quality, we are able to use less material to produce steel. So in itself is more sustainable, or when you have less and you can do more. But besides that, we have been working in the last 20 years to develop new technologies to make even more productive and lucrative for all of us. So we are developing what we call agglomeration process. So we developed the briquettes. So it's a kind of agglomeration where when we put this kind of iron ore agglomerated in the whole value chain, we can, starting with the reduction of 10% of the emissions in the value chain, this whole steel value chain. But for us, in our scope 1 and 2, we are decreasing 80%. So it's very meaningful what we are doing on this. And this technology we have been developing the last 2 decades, and since 2023 we converted the first plant for that. So it's not something in the future, it's something in the present. We like to say in Vale that we are working for the mining of the future, but it happens in the present, starts now. So this is a clear step that we are taking in driving this decarbonization, but there is another one, because we are not going to do this alone. We are just in the beginning of the value chain, so we need the other players on the value chain to be together. And a good example I'd like to give on this is that we have around 50 MOUs with different companies and players in this value chain to develop together, because nobody's going to do alone. And we truly believe that this is a value chain endeavor. So we have been doing this to drive this together. But it's a high-intensive capital. It's a long-term thing, which required shared risks, shared vision, and beliefs on that. And so this is also very important. And I would say on my beginning remarks here is that with these briquettes, we can use also to produce what we call HBI, also a very technical thing, with high quality iron that is used to produce steel. And this can be used in electric furnace instead of the blast furnace. And today in the world, we see the steel companies around 30% in electric, 70% in blast. But we see that in the near future, and I'm not talking about 20 years, I'm talking a much shorter time, we can see even the opposite. So 7% for in electric furnace and 30%. So this is the clear, and the industry is committed to this decarbonization.
Again, 3 things that I think are key that you mentioned. The first one is that you're starting from the perspective already of competitiveness of Brazil's iron ore, being more decarbonized than others. The second thing that I think is, I don't think we understand how the energy transition is an opportunity for technological revolution in many of our countries. So I stress the amount of R&D that you guys are putting into the value chain in order to do this process. And the third one is that we're all in this together, and that you're bringing all of your suppliers along. And so those 3 things I think are key in how we do this. John, over to you, the finance guy. So this is, it's one of the key obstacles always to scaling and to advancing in clean energy technologies is mobilization of capital, access to finance. And there is just a lot of headwinds right now, and just it will be good for the audience just to hear from you how you're seeing the financing of clean energy technologies, and if you want to go into steel, green steel specifically, that will also be very useful. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of headlines about challenges in energy transition, but I maybe starting from top down, you know, overall clean energy investment continues to grow and grow pretty quickly. You know, there's about $3 trillion, give or take, that's invested in energy systems. about 2 of which is in clean energy and renewables. And if you look at where the growth is, and Cornelius mentioned this well, China really actually driving that, and actually the Chinese renewable investments are more than global fossil fuel investments, right? So we're seeing a huge increase there. And even in areas where there have been headwinds, and some of these are actually quite important for green steel, so hydrogen is a good example. The hydrogen market has been tough, and hydrogen is a key part of green steel, but it is growing 50% year on year. So the capacity we're expecting to 4x between now and 2030, the challenge from a climate perspective is that's nowhere near enough to hit any of our climate goals, but it is growth, right? And there is progress happening. So I don't think that we should lose sight of that, even though that there are some challenges in the market. I think specific to green steel and also the Brazilian landscape, I mean, definitely where there's been the biggest transformation, and this is, everything is sort of downstream of, is in the power markets are really undergoing a structural change, especially in the West. And what Brazil has great access to with clean power, renewable power, the ability to run, whether it's electric furnaces or a variety of other industrial technologies with clean renewable power is a huge advantage. And what the market is developing to, and you both mentioned it in passing, is the ability now, and it's an emerging ability, it's still relatively small, but it's growing, for what are called environmental attribute credits, essentially market-based mechanisms, where if you're not directly in the supply chain of a particular supplier, be it in steel, cement, concrete, or, and also very relevant for Brazil, aviation fuel, which is going to be a big driver of decarbonization, and Brazil is very well positioned for, you have the ability to actually monetize that green premium outside of your value chain, right? And as the large tech companies become much more CapEx intensive, so they go from being very capital light to very capital intensive and start building stuff, they have no real direct way to change that supply chain. So folks who are really innovating, like Vale, on lower carbon products now have a new way to monetize that, which can lower the cost and then get it into the full supply chain, which is very exciting. So definitely some challenges within the overall energy landscape, but that shouldn't take away from top line growth and also some of the innovation that we're seeing.
Thank you. I think one forgets that, yes, the type of goals that we have for net zero are huge, right? And so they feel sometimes insurmountable, and they actually, and they're very helpful because it tells you where you should be going, but it sometimes clouds the fact that we are actually moving in the right direction, that there's a direction of travel, even with all the obstacles that you're mentioning, and that Brazil is, from the point of view of somebody that looks at these things globally, is very, very well positioned. So Cornelius, I want to go back to you because we want to land this more in terms of Brazil and in terms of the challenges, right? And so we've all established that this is important, that green steel is fundamental for the energy transition, and that Brazil has can be very competitive here. And so, what are the obstacles to get us where we need to be?
Yeah, I mean,
C1.
There is, we could always do kind of a glass half full and the glass half empty story. And, let's talk about the obstacles. So it's maybe a little bit more glass half empty. And I mean, a lot of this is really hard, right? And especially if you think about, an industry like steel, if you want to build new assets at scale, that costs a lot of money. It's easily, multi-billion-dollar investments that are needed, that need to be made by individual companies, such as Vale or others, but it's a very, very big check that needs to be written. And in the current environment, with a lot of uncertainty and relatively high financing costs, et cetera, that's very difficult to pull off because it's not entirely clear where the market is going, and it's a big transition. You can have all kinds of confidence that, I don't know, by 2040 or by 2045 or whatever, there will be demand, and it will be widely decarbonized, etc. But it's more the next 3, 4, 5 years that are really, really difficult to kind of make the economics work. And at the same time, if you try to look at the same thing with more the glass half full perspective, coming back to a little bit what you said, John, about the kind of value chain and the buyers at the end of the value chain. If you kind of spread out the cost for that new steel plant, 2 billion, whatever, across all the products that are made with that steel. Like if you spread out that cost, let's say, to a car or a washing machine, most of you probably would overestimate the increment. So if you produce a washing machine as is, and all you change is that you take low carbon steel instead of conventional steel, the increase in total cost is about 1%, which most buyers and consumers probably wouldn't even notice. So it's not a matter of, this is unaffordable, at the macro level. It's more a question of what is the right mechanism to kind of spread out the burden and make it affordable or make it viable, which brings us back again to those market mechanisms that we talked about. How can you kind of organize, especially in the early days when there's only scattered demand and only scattered supply, that you can bring those together and you can start in a way spreading this out. So that's, a little bit on the financing. I think there's a solution, it's just not quite straightforward to get to it. There's a couple of other topics. It comes up in many countries and every time again. Permitting just takes years and years, and there's a good amount of uncertainty and walkbacks and changes, etc. That's like terrible for any large capital project, right? I'm sure there's also, and probably, I don't know, Grazielle, being in Brazil, you can probably comment on that much more. There are probably some challenges around infrastructure, grid, other types of infrastructure that isn't maybe quite ready yet for, huge increase in electrification or maybe hydrogen production, et cetera, et cetera. So how is that supported by the system? So that's just, a couple of ideas that come to mind that make it hard. And it is hard. And that's also why we're all seeing kind of a progress that, might be pointing in the right direction, but I think is by no means fast enough.
For those of you that might not be as familiar, steel, like cement, for example, they're called hard-to-abate sectors for a reason. So to your point, this is not easy, and I do appreciate you looking at this in a holistic way, because it is not one thing that needs to happen. It's kind of a building blocks. A lot of things need to come together at the same time: permitting, capital, infrastructure. But Grazielle, I want to turn it now to you to actually now give us some examples about what Vale is doing. What does this mean exactly? When you decarbonize steel, what exactly are you doing? Tell us some of the projects, if you can go a little bit more in detail, so that I think the audience can benefit from the leader in green steel.
Okay. Well, first of all, I think giving the context. So decarbonization is not a trend. It's a business strategy for Vale. And we truly believe on this, on long-term commitments, and which of course can be detailed in short terms. But Vale has targets for Scope 1 and 2, minus 33%. But Vale is the only mining company that has targets for Scope 3 reduction, with minus 15%. And today we are 13. So we are around there, but it's, of course, it's a journey. So when you set this as a business strategy, you move, this big ship. I like to give this analogy because when you are thinking about its infrastructure, it's not just about having the right minerals or the right products. You have to transport it, to ship it to your customers that normally are very far away from where you are. So this machine has to work like a clock, like a perfect clock on that. So I would say that, so besides doing the local R&D, so the research and development of what we can do better with the endowments and the minerals that we have, how we can do this in a way that our customers want to, because we serve our customers, so you need to understand it. And where are the right places we have to be? We are a Brazilian company based in Brazil, but we have operations worldwide. So a good example is what we call the mega hubs. And what are the mega hubs? Mega hubs are this, I would say, this line of the value chain with different players bringing its best solution to make it this integrated and very smooth operation, if I can say this to still smooth, but to do this in a very sharp way. And we have been working in the Middle East, we have been working in Brazil. It's very important that we understand that steel is about energy. So we have, and if you have a commitment for decarbonization, you are talking about renewable energy. You are talking about low carbon emissions. So we are looking around the world, what are the places that we need to be closer to our customers, to serve them on that, and to make this scalable. But I think that one of the biggest challenges, you asked Cornelius, is that we have to be envisioning the future. Because these things you cannot produce 1 year to another. You have to invest today for the steel market of 10 years ahead. So you have to have a clear vision, you have to have capital to make it happen, and this persistency. That is, even if sometimes you have to slow the pace, you are still going like a big ship again. It's the big ship when it takes a direction. It's not so easy to change the direction. So we understand that decarbonization is this ship that goes in the right direction, and that we need to have everyone on board. So I would say have capital, strategy, long-term vision, share the risks, and have the right partners, and look this as a business strategy to our to endure our presence as a leading company in mining worldwide.
Thank you. This is the idea of the hubs, I think. So if I am understanding this correctly, this is not just Vale, that you're seeing this pressure industry-wide. So you're talking about Vale, and Vale is definitely a leader in this, but this is you see this also from your peers.
We are saying more for the other actors of the value chain with us, like our customers and the customers of our customers. So this is what I mentioned.
Fantastic. Okay. So one of the things that you all have mentioned is the high capital needs that this requires. And so can you think about, so if you were to invest in financing green steel, is this something, how much of this can be done in terms of decarbonization specifically? And can you arrive at this goal only with financing decarbonization of green steel, or are there other market mechanisms that are needed in order for the industry to reach its decarbonization goals?
I mean, there's definitely not enough project finance capital for the size of the capital stack that's needed for green steel globally. That's not to say that certain projects can't move forward. They can, but at the price and the overall capital cost, it will be very, very insufficient. I mean, when we look at the investment opportunities, I guess, in and around green steel and more broadly, you know, we get very focused on like technology enablers of green steel, right? So, you know, again, you can invest in next generation electrolyzers, right? That can ultimately lower the cost of green hydrogen, for example, when coupled with renewable power, can have a significant decarbonization effect. And we believe that, you know, as you're cutting that electrolyzer price with every generation of technology, you're then enabling a narrowing of that green premium over time. You know, the actual financing of the, you know, multi-billion size has got to be backed with, and this is true not just in steel, but in all the other deals, including carbon dioxide removal, even carbon credits, right? You need an offtake associated with it. And then you can get sufficient, generally speaking, can get sufficient project capital. That all has to line up, though, in a very specific way, because with the size of these projects, nobody's going to take merchant risk on them. Nobody's going to say, hey, you're going to be able to build this, and then ultimately they will come. You need that, obviously, pre-assigned. So our focus has really been on trying to drive the tech cost down. And I would say that's both with electrolyzers, also with just the cost of low carbon power overall, right? So the lower that you can get your dollar per megawatt cost overall, the more efficient you're able to make green steel and also other types of commodities in the hard-to-abate area.
particularly the idea of investing also in technological enablers that are not only applicable to steel, but to other sectors. That makes a lot of sense. So this is my last round of questions before we are asked to end this panel, which has been fascinating. Thank you for all your fantastic comments. Based on BCG's global perspective, what concrete steps would you recommend to Brazil to accelerate or to the path for green steel leadership?
So I'm a firm believer in the power of the example, and to find ways to make it real goes a long way in driving acceptance and adoption, and also driving a little bit of FOMO, fear of missing out, among others, right? And I think we're starting to see that in places. For instance, I don't know, in cement. I don't know how many of you are close to the cement space. Now there is a cement plant in Norway by Heidelberg Materials that has a running carbon capture facility by the side. So they are in position to sell low carbon cement. There's also many smaller players that are doing the same thing, where you can go and you see it and you can buy a bag of cement that has basically a zero carbon footprint. There's a very, very large steel plant being built in Sweden by Stegra. It's going to take another year or two, I think. But then again, there will be steel that is low carbon, and then it becomes real and not some vision far down the road, but something that can happen. And maybe more specifically regarding Brazil, I think what's important about these examples is don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And the first installment or the first version is probably not going to be the best, but it's the first, and that matters a lot. And maybe it's a bit smaller, or it's a bit less efficient, or it's a bit more costly in the operation, but it's probably not, or it may not run for 20 years. Make it a bit smaller, but make it faster to the extent that works. Because then, it triggers others to kind of copy and join, etc. So power of example, I think, would be great. And I think in Brazil, there's probably some nuclei to start from. And there are ambitious companies, and there's, a supporting government, and there's, we've talked about the kind of, natural conditions and resources, etc. So making it real, I think that would be great.
Love the idea of proof of concept. You lead being the first one, even if it's not the perfect. And so talking about somebody that has to actually do this, what are the things that you think Vale is doing that goes to what Cornelius is saying, that of that leadership, of being proof of concept, of being the first ones there? Where do you think your company is actually going in the direction of what Cornelius is saying?
Well, definitely we are not going to have FOMO. Definitely not. So we understand that because of this endowment that we have, that it's just the best thing we can do for the planet, but also for the mining industry. Setting the standards higher on that, and to really advocate. I have to tell you that me and my colleagues, we have been around the world bringing this and co-developing. As again, I think that partnership is just crucial for that. And I think that, again, Brazil has this opportunity of being the world leader on that, not just in volume. We are talking about driving the technology, and this technology is developed here by our people in Brazil. So just keep the pace and advance on that. Thank you so much for the invitation. It was a pleasure to talk a little bit about green steel, and hopefully it's going to be insightful for you all. Thank you.
Well, we're going to leave the last word to you, John. I am sorry, Grazielle, let's just shut the door, but please, your last thoughts.
I mean, Cornelius said, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I maybe take that, I like that in that, one, we need to get projects on the ground for green steel. I guess the other thing that I would emphasize around that is a lot of these approaches, including some of the approaches to green steel, won't be 100% decarbonized right away, right? It'll be a reduction in the overall carbon intensity. And I think, there's been maybe in some sectors too much push for it's got to be 100% decarbonized like right away, no matter what, immediately tomorrow. And it's not realistic, right? And you can't do it. The technology isn't there. The cost is too high. So what we've been working with a number of partners is thinking through like your whole system, right? So you're not going to be able to fully decarbonize, for example, the steel and cement sector right away. But one thing that Brazil, for example, is very well positioned in is there's an abundant resource base of carbon removal available through carbon credits and other areas. There's other parts of the economy that you're working to decarbonize, right? You're tackling all of these things at once, and you're all pointing towards that right goal, which is making, it's not immediate, but it's incremental, it's economic, it's sustainable from a financial perspective, progress. And I think that we've got to bear that in mind as we move forward.
Now you can say thank you.